Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Sorry about the delay in starting. We just had a few technical hitches there, so I hope everyone is fine and everyone can hear us. It's a real shame. We would normally do this as an event where you could all come into the hall and there'd be loads of participants and you could have a chat with universities and colleges and things. So we put all of that information on the Careers Companion on the live virtual careers tab. So hopefully you can spend some time doing that after the talk today. And I'm really pleased we've got Ross from Oxford Brookes University, who's going to do a general introduction to universities, which is really useful. Even if you think you might not be interested in something, it's really good to find out about that. So I'm going to hand you over to Ross. Thanks very much.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome. So as Miss Havill said, I will be introducing higher education. So I'll just give you a brief overview, a little bit about me as well to give you some context. So my name is Ross Pickering and I'm a recent graduate in geography from Oxford Brookes University. So I graduated last year. So if you do have any questions about university from someone who's been recently, particularly with things like COVID and other things like that, feel free to ask. There is a chat function available and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. Okay, so the main topics then, the things we're going to be looking at today, but it will be a brief overview because you still have a little bit of time to think about this. But I'll talk to you about the routes into university, because believe it or not, there are lots of different routes. There isn't one set way in which you go to university. The different types of courses and universities available. A brief overview on finance and also some things you can do outside of your academic studies as well. So the routes into university then. So many of you at the moment will be studying for your level 2 qualifications, and these will be things like GCSEs, vocational qualifications, etc. So most of you are probably thinking about your GCSEs or doing your GCSEs at the moment. But you're probably thinking when your teachers tell you, oh, it's really important to get those grades, which it is, what does that actually mean, or what can I do with that next? And you can see by this chart here where that actually can take you after you complete your GCSE. So most students go on to do A-levels next, but not all students do that. Many students opt to do a vocational qualification, many of which are known as BTECs, but you can also do others like NVQs as well. And some students, when they get to 16, will decide that they want to do an apprenticeship instead. And that's a more practical based qualification where you can get some hands-on experience with an employer and get a qualification at the same time. So after you've done level 3 qualifications, which usually take 2 years, but some are 3, so that's normally between when you're 16 and 18, then you might be thinking about what you want to do next, because compulsory education finishes at level 3. So about 50% of students in the UK at 18 decide to go to university, and they will probably do what's known as an honours degree or an undergraduate programme. However, these look quite different in different courses and universities across the country. So I'll explain how those university programs work. So usually when you're 18, you usually will apply for one particular course. So it'll be one subject as opposed to lots of subjects you'll be studying in school. And you usually do the course for up to 3 years, but some courses are a little bit longer, depending on if you do like a placement or just the length of study. But most courses are 3 years, and that would be levels 4, 5 and 6. So by the time you've done 3 years of an undergraduate degree, you will graduate with what's known as a Bachelor of Honours, and I'll explain how bachelors and things like that works in the next couple of slides. So that would take you up to level 6. However, not everybody does the degree route, and actually there are lots of other routes that you can explore as well. So believe it or not, you can actually do a higher level apprenticeship. So you can do an apprenticeship which is equivalent to a degree. So it comes out at the same level as a degree programme. And we've got there are higher level apprenticeships in the UK and degree apprenticeships. Now these are quite new. They've only been going a couple of years. However, they're a really good opportunity for you to actually get some experience and get a sort of higher level qualification at the same time. And degree apprenticeships are available at Oxford Brookes and many other universities as well. They're also available in local colleges too. So I don't know how well you're aware of like Wiltshire College. Wiltshire College is a further education college throughout the county of Wiltshire, and they offer a lot of higher apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships and more vocational qualifications as well. So to go to university, you don't actually have to move away from home. A lot of students think at 18, I've got to move away from family, I must go as far as possible. Actually, that's not the case. You can study locally within the town or city that you live in, and you don't actually have to move away from home at all. So hopefully that explains the routes into university and the different levels. So delving into sort of the traditional undergraduate programme then, this is known as an honours degree, and you may hear in a few years' time these symbols start to come up, but you probably wonder what they mean. So BA, BSc, BEng, etc. BA stands for Bachelor of Arts and BSc stands for Bachelor of Science, and then BEng is Bachelor of Engineering, and they're all honours degree programmes. And those courses are usually taught at university over about 3 or 4 years. However, that's not the course or not the degree programme that everybody does. There are lots of different types. So you could want to do a foundation course. So a foundation course is designed to help you progress onto a particular course. Some students do it because they haven't necessarily got the qualifications matched for the course they want to study, and they do a foundation course to get them the right level of points. But also, and increasingly so, a lot of students actually do a foundation course because it gives them more time to prepare for the actual field they want to study. So a lot of art students, a lot of sort of architecture students will opt to do a foundation course first before doing an honours degree. A foundation course is not to be confused with a foundation degree. So a foundation degree is one that combines work-based learning while studying, usually at a partnership college. When I was just talking about Wiltshire College would be an example of a partnership college. So Wiltshire College runs a number of different foundation degrees, and all those degrees are accredited by Oxford Brookes and also University of Bath as well. So what that means is you can study at that college, but the qualification that you will gain will be an Oxford Brookes or a University of Bath degree. So on your CV later in life, you can absolutely say that you've got a degree from Oxford Brookes because you have, but it means you don't actually have to be at the university to get that qualification. And that can be quite significant if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily want to move away from home, or you have family reasons why you can't leave, etc. And then the last one at the bottom here is higher and degree apprenticeships. So these are ones where you study, but you do so through an employer. So you would look primarily for the apprenticeship with the employer. So you'd look for, I don't know, an apprenticeship with Tesco, let's say, and then they would actually partner you within a local college or university. So you can study at the same time and work. And that will be sort of, you'll be working towards your apprenticeship. Funny enough, in our team at Oxford Brookes, we actually had someone who's doing a degree apprenticeship in our team, and their apprenticeship's in marketing, and they're currently working with us as well as studying at a local college in Oxford while they get their qualification. So it just goes to show that you don't necessarily have to fully study and not work. You can combine the two together, which is really important. So classifications then. So the BA and the BSc are usually the ones that are 3 years in length. So the BSc stands for Bachelor of Science, and that's usually for courses that are a bit more science-based, so things like biology, chemistry, physics, but also things like mathematics, geography as well. Whereas the Bachelor of Arts is normally subjects that are a little bit more creative or might have a bit more field work in them. So things like business and management, art, history, government and politics, etc., etc. And there are lots of courses available. The Bachelor degree is distinguished from the Master's degree because usually the Bachelor's is one that's 3 years in length, whereas the Master's is one that's a little bit further up the chain. You do a little bit more studying. Usually what you can do is you can do a Bachelor's course for 3 years, and then you can go and study a Master's course afterwards, which is usually about 12 months in length. You can study at the same university you did your Bachelor's at, but you don't have to. It's up to you. And then some courses may actually have what's known as an integrated master. So the example, this one at the bottom here, Masters of Engineering. Quite a lot of engineering courses, etc., and other programs as well, like architecture, are usually integrated masters. So they will be 4-year courses in length, but you'll roll straight into the masters as soon as you completed your bachelor's. You have a gap.
Sorry, Ross, can I just interrupt you there? Sorry, we've got
sure.
a technical hitch here. Your PowerPoint isn't changing. We're still on the first slide, and we were trying to work out if that was our problem or whether that was from yours.
Has it changed now?
Yes, it has.
Brilliant.
Yes, it
what
has.
I might do then, I've noticed sometimes this happens before when I'm presenting live. If I have it on full screen, it doesn't sometimes change the slides. So if I do have the slideshow at the side, it should change with it. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Change the slide a couple of times now. Yeah, that's all great. It's all working now. That's brilliant. Okay. So yes, the students might be a little bit lost on some of those issues.
No, that's okay. Apologies. I didn't realise it wasn't changing. Thank you for alerting me on that.
Thanks. Okay, that's brilliant. I'll leave that with you. Thanks, Ross.
So, what can I get out of university then? So this is probably a really big question that you might want to ask. So what sorts of transferable skills and experience do you get out of it? So I've put down 6 things here that I found were really useful, what I got out of university, but this is not an exhaustive list, and I'll give you some examples. So something that is very significant I found from going to university is gaining independence. I would have said it was the first time in my life that I really sort of was truly independent away from my family, because I did move away from home, and it was the first time that I had to manage my own money, my own time, and I really had to be organised with making sure that I was able to fit in all my commitments. So going to university will be really helpful in getting you to become much more independent, which is of course a very good life skill that you'll need throughout your life, whether it's in employment, with your own family, and just in day-to-day activities. So independence is really valuable. Also, transferable skills. So lots of the different activities that you do, whether it's related to the course or outside your course, so things like sports, societies, after school, after university clubs, etc., will provide you with lots of transferable skills, whether it's from things like presenting, which I'm doing now, and that's something I really developed when I was at university, whether it's being able to manage a team, whether it's been able to do a project yourself. All those different things relate to lots of useful transferable skills which you can put on your CV and you can take to employment after you graduate. Also, university is very good for personal development as well, because actually I found when I went, I developed very much as a person across the 3 years of my course. I started off as a very sort of shy yet naive young adult, and actually I graduated as someone who's much more confident and more likely to get involved in different situations, whether it be in work or outside of work. So I found I developed quite a lot in a very short space of time. You probably heard this thing here, earnings. It is true that if you go to university over a life course, the likelihood of earnings will increase. However, that isn't necessarily straight away. I know some students sort of think, oh, if I go to university within 6 months, I'm going to earn double the amount my friends do. That's usually not the case. That's normally over a life course. So over 20, 30 years, you will notice the difference, but not necessarily in the first 2 years. University is a great way to make new experiences. So whether that's meeting new people, which you meet not just within the school. So whereas in school, you meet people probably across the town that you live in, so the Marlborough or Wiltshire area. At university, people come from all over the country and abroad as well. So I met people from Australia, America, all different parts of the UK, and that was a really good way to find out more about different people's lives, and it really sort of broadened my horizons in terms of the way I think about the world. So I found the new experiences to be absolutely fantastic, and you also make great friendships as well. Funny enough, at the moment during lockdown, every week on a Saturday I'm still meeting with my university friends, even though I haven't seen them for nearly a year. We still meet and have quizzes and catch-ups and reminisce about our experience at university. So a lot of the friendships you'll make at university will last for life, or for certainly a very long time after you graduate. But that is not an exhaustive list. There's lots of other things that you can get out of university. They're just 6 things that I thought were quite significant that I found I've experienced as a graduate now that I've completed my university studies. So unfortunately, the number's already there. Normally, if it was on a full screen, it should show up afterwards. But can you believe there's actually 395 universities in the UK? So actually, there's a lot of choice to choose from. A lot of students think there's only like 10 or 12 universities, but actually there's, as you can see, nearly 400. So with that in mind, how do you choose then a university? Well, something that might be quite a sort of significant factor is, where is the university? Are you somebody who wants to move really far away from home, or are you somebody who wants to live locally? So where you are in Wiltshire, Oxford Brookes is probably considered a more local university. It's probably only about 50 miles from your school. But actually, as you can see on this map here, and this is only a very small cherry pick of universities, there's lots of other universities. There are lots of universities throughout the UK. So if you want to go to the north of England, you've got places like Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, etc. If you're someone who wants to go far up north to Scotland and get as far away from home as possible, you've got universities in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and some more rural locations as well. Quite a lot of students want to go to London for university. And there are many different London universities, both in the centre, but also in the suburbs as well. So it just goes to show there's lots of different types of university out there, and in all different geographical places. Some people might choose a university if they've got family nearby. And when I was looking at university, this was the case for me. So I've got quite a lot of family in Bournemouth. So I did have a look at Bournemouth University as a good location because I already was familiar with the area. So it meant I didn't have to make as much transition between moving away from home and going to university. But in the end, I decided on somewhere I'd never even visited before. And I'm very pleased that I did make that decision and I did choose Oxford Brookes. So it might be the case that you do choose a university eventually after year 13 that you don't know much about that city, and that will give you a great opportunity to sort of explore and experience a new place. So types of university then. So there are three main types, but there are some other subtypes as well. You've probably not heard of these terms before. So unlike school, where it's sort of quite standard structure in terms of how the school operates, universities can be quite different in style and their type. So the three types I've got on screen here. The first one is collegiate. Now, what I mean by collegiate, you've probably not heard that term before. I mean colleges. So the University of Oxford would be an example of this. So when you apply to the University of Oxford, you actually apply to a specific college rather than applying to the institution itself. So it might be, for example, you apply to St John's College, Oxford. And that would be the case if you applied for either Oxford, Cambridge or Durham. But they're the only three universities in England, Wales and Scotland where it's collegiate based. Most universities are this second type, which is known as a campus university, and Oxford Brookes is one of these campus universities. However, some universities are on one campus and it's a very large campus with lots of facilities, etc. So it's a singular one, and that would be an example of that would be Leeds. Some of those campuses can be found in city centres, but some can be in rural areas as well. So places like Lancaster or Bath University, they're not actually in the city centre at all. They're actually out on the edge of the city, and the entire campus is like a whole student community. Other universities like Oxford Brookes have multiple campuses. So we have 4 campuses, 3 of which are in Oxford and 1 in Swindon. So it gives students the opportunity to study at different places, and also means, for example, if you live in the Swindon area, it means you can study more locally to home as well. And some universities are completely city-based. So like Birmingham City University, if you've ever been to Birmingham, if you get out of Birmingham New Street Station, Birmingham City University is right in front of you. So it's right in the heart of the city centre, whereas other universities like Oxford Brookes is a little bit more suburban. So how would you narrow down your choice then? So there's lots of different things you want to consider, and some of those considerations are more personal to you. But some of the things that I sort of considered when I was looking at university includes things like size. So I was someone who wanted a little bit larger than school or college, but I didn't want something that was a bit too overwhelming. So most universities have about 15,000 students, so probably the size of the town of Marlborough as their student population. Some universities are a bit larger. So Manchester University has about 40,000 students, whereas there are some small universities like Bath Spa, which have less than 5,000 students. So it really does vary in size throughout the country. And depending on what suits you, you may want to choose your university based on how large it is, etc. There are also other things you want to consider, things like reputation. So you may start to hear, those of you who may be in year 10 or 11, in the next few months and years, you might start to hear about league tables in universities. So a bit similar to school. Universities have league tables, and they're ranked based on their subject, their performance, their student satisfaction, etc. But the things to be aware of with league tables, there is the general university league tables that's published online, but it's good to look out for the league tables for the course that you're interested in when it comes to that point, because often the league table for your course can actually be quite different in terms of where universities are ranked and placed compared to the league table generally. So to give an example of that, Oxford Brookes is a middle ranking university. It ranks about mid-table in the league. However, for some courses where it's a bit more specialist, so things like architecture, we're in the top 10 schools in the country. So it just goes to show that by looking at the general league table, you wouldn't necessarily find out that information. So it's good to look at the subject league tables as well. You may want to consider the facilities available, whether that's on campus, but also off campus as well. So when I mean facilities, I mean like libraries, student support facilities, but also things like if you're looking for a placement opportunity and to get work experience, you want to look at what the partnerships are with local employers as well. And something that may come into that in that decision making is location, because obviously the opportunities and things you can experience differ by location. If you're looking for sort of certain types of employment, you may want to look at the large cities where that employment is available. But if you're maybe looking at more localised employment or a particular industry, you may want to go to a specific location where that industry is present. So, for example, if you were looking to work in maybe the coastal sector or the marine sector, Obviously, choosing a university inland isn't probably going to have that many marine sector opportunities, where if you looked at a university on the coast, like Bournemouth, Portsmouth, etc., there's probably going to be lots of marine opportunities available. So it does depend what you want to do long term. And you also may want to look at what financial support is available. And believe it or not, there's lots of financial support available. However, it isn't necessarily always obvious, other than the main system of student finance, which I'll briefly touch on, what the financial support available is. So that's maybe something after this talk is finished. It might be something you want to research about what financial support is available, because it does differ by university. So then, believe it or not, how many courses can you study at undergraduate level in the UK? The answer is 50,000, which when I first heard this, and I only heard this about halfway through my university course, I couldn't believe just how high it was, because I never ever thought there'd be that many. However, obviously then, when you're choosing a course, there's a lot to choose from. So how would you narrow down that choice? I've got 4 things here that I think are quite significant in narrow down your choice, but considering some of the other things we've looked at on the previous pages, they may also influence your decision. But many students, and this was myself included, had a favourite subject either at school or A level, and that subject they're just really passionate about and sort of excited by it and wanted to pursue it more, and that was the case for me. So my favourite subject at A level was geography, and I kind of knew that if I was going to go on to higher education, I wanted to study something to do with geography, and that is what I ended up doing. However, that's not the case for everyone. Some people may want to choose a course based on their extracurricular interests. So at university, believe it or not, you can do subjects like sports, you can do PE, you can do music, and they are actual full degree programs at university. So what you might think is sort of an after school club or something now, actually that can be a whole subject at university that you can study and have fun with as well. So some students may choose based on extracurricular interests. Increasingly so, a lot of students are choosing their course based on a career in mind, and this is particularly the case for maybe courses like architecture, law, etc., and teaching, where obviously with the course it's very much aligned to going into a particular professional, particular career path. So if you know at this age maybe you want to be a primary school teacher, which some children and students do quite at an early age, it probably is a good idea to study like primary teacher education at university. But actually this last one, and I think this last one is really significant, a lot of students actually try something completely new. So there are courses at university. When I first arrived, and I heard students and friends of mine that became friends were studying them, I'd never even heard of these courses ever before. So things like Japanese studies, I never even knew that you could study a whole degree about a particular country and a particular culture. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. I wish I'd known more about that before applying to university. So other things you want to consider is course structure. So course structure is a little bit different to school or what you're familiar with at the moment. So at university, you usually do one course. However, you can do what's known as a combined or a joint honours course, which is where you can study 2 or maybe even 3 subjects together. So for example, at Oxford Brookes, we have a course called Economics, Politics and International Relations. So really that's 3 subjects, economics, the politics and then the international relations, combined together. And you can choose particular topics within those subjects that you want to study as part of your course. Courses at university generally differ in length. So unlike school, it doesn't sort of cover sort of 39 weeks of the year. Usually university is a little bit shorter in terms of its terms. So Oxford Brookes has 2 terms, and they are 12 weeks in length, plus an exam week after each of the terms. So in total, it only actually covers 26 weeks of the year, which is a little bit shorter than school, which is about 36, 39. So you may want to consider the length of course, because actually, while most courses will fit into that term length, some courses are a little bit longer, and those courses will be ones that have placements, for example. So you've obviously seen at the moment with the current pandemic, you'll see people like nurses on the front line helping to save and help coronavirus patients. Nursing is actually a course at university, and we've got a lot of nurses at the moment who are helping with the current pandemic. But nursing students generally have a longer course length than most other students, because a lot of their course, about 50% of it, is structured around placement. So actually working in the hospital and in the critical care centres, helping patients on the front line to build up their experience. So when they graduate from the course in nursing, they can then go and become nurses straight after. Also, some courses have this option of sandwich. Now, you'll probably think when you first heard this term, what's it got to do with a sandwich? Is it to do with eating food? The answer is no. A sandwich course is where you have a placement or an optional placement included as part of the programme. So it sort of spreads it out, if you like. So what you might do is you do 2 years of study at university, then you go off and do a placement with an employer, and you can choose that employer, but the university can help you as well. And you might do that for up to 12. You might do that for up to 12 months outside of university, and then you come back to the university for the final year. So usually placements are a good opportunity for you to actually get experience of the working world, and also if you want to go into a particular career sector, that might help you get that experience that you need. So when you graduate, you've got that sort of necessary experience and advantage over other candidates, so you can get into that field. Teaching style then. So this is something that took me by a bit of surprise actually when I went to university, or shall I say I wasn't expecting it. So I was the first in my family to go to university, so I didn't really have any idea what to expect when I first got there. And I did notice that the teaching style is very different, and that's not different in a bad way, but in the sense that where in school you probably get a lot of contact time and a lot of sort of guidance around when deadlines are, etc. At university, it's rather different. So when you go to university, you're normally an adult. So in terms of the sort of relationship you have between your teachers and yourself, it's usually a little bit different. It's a bit more sort of informal, a bit more like a professional relationship like you'd have in the workplace. So in terms of the teaching style, there are assessments like there are in school or college. So there are things like exams, there's coursework, there's other teaching styles. So I had quite an unusual range of different styles of assessment at university. I had to do a pitch, so a bit like you see on Dragon's Den, I had to pitch about a particular topic and theme within my course. I also had to do an exhibition, which was really exciting. I enjoyed that. And I also had to present in front of the Royal Geographical Society in the final year as well, which is a really fun experience that I won't forget. So the teaching styles and assessments can be quite different to school or college. And also the style or the delivery of teaching is a bit different as well. So the teaching is a bit more like what I'm doing now, which might be considered a lecture, and that's probably a term you haven't heard before, which is where sort of a member of staff in the university or an academic will talk to you on stage when things are physical. Obviously at the moment things are virtual, but they will talk to you on stage, and then you sort of listen in and make notes about that lecture, and then at the end you can go and ask questions to that lecturer or academic at the end. But where in school it's a bit more like a class-based setting, at university lectures usually take place in what's known as lecture theatres. So if you've ever been to like the cinema or the theatre and you sit in those rows in the audience, it's a little bit like that, but rather than watching a film or a play on stage, there'll be a member of staff or several members of staff teaching you that subject. So the teaching style is a little bit different. It's a bit like in your school if you've had like the headmaster give an assembly and they talk at you and you sort of listening in the audience. It's a little bit like that, but it's not necessarily maybe as tense as that. So outside of academic studies then, there's lots of different opportunities for you to get involved at university, probably the most amount of opportunities I've ever had in my life actually. So there's opportunities for you to get part-time work, and you'll see below in the picture, you can see someone wearing a student ambassador hoodie. So I was actually part of the student ambassador scheme at university, and that was a great way of actually building up my confidence, meeting new people. So you can see the student there is giving like a talk or a campus tour to students. It's a great way to actually build up your experience, but also to make friends as well. And there's also lots of opportunities for you to volunteer. So you can volunteer in the community, whether that be at a charity or maybe you want to volunteer at university itself. There's also the option for lots of trips. Obviously in a normal year, there'd be more trips than there is at the moment because of the travel restrictions. However, even though there's not that many trips, there is lots of opportunities for you to get involved online as well. So there's things like virtual work experience taking place at the moment. You can also do things like internships, which you might not have heard that term before, but what an internship is where you do like a period of placement or a period of employment with an employer over maybe a summer or maybe a certain period or month in the year. And internships can be quite often a very good way to build up your work experience, and then which will give you sort of a greater advantage when it comes to employment after graduating. So some students might do internships which are taking place virtual, but there are lots of trips as well. And in my second year of studies, I had the pleasure of going to Malta as part of my course. And then I actually conducted field work in the country and interviewed local residents about pollution within their capital city of Valletta. So that was a really good experience, and also one that sort of made me build up my skills and independence, etc., going to another country and conducting field work. There's also lots of fun activities outside of university study as well, so things like clubs and societies, and you can see the students there, they look like they're playing a rugby game or American football. There's lots of different sporting activities and also other more creative things like art, music, drama. Believe it or not, I was actually in a society at university called the Tea Society, and we used to meet up on a weekly basis and come together on a Wednesday evening after our studies and lectures and have tea and coffee and biscuits together. It was a really simple idea, but it was actually a really fun way of making friends and sort of chatting to people about their experience and their time at university, and I really enjoyed that. So that kind of lends itself onto student life then. So there's lots of different facets and aspects of student life. One of those is societies, and I was just sort of talking about the Tea Society there. At Oxford Brookes, we have over 100 societies, but that's not like an exhaustive list, and that differs by university. Some universities have over 500 or 1,000 societies. So there's lots of different things, from sort of cultural societies, religious societies, arts and crafts, etc., etc. And also at Brookes, I was very lucky in the fact that you could actually create your own society. So I created a couple of societies around the interests that I had, which was really good. Also, all universities have what's known as a students' union, and that's probably something you've not heard of before because most schools and colleges don't have a union. Some sixth form colleges do, but most schools don't. So what a student union is like a representative of the student body. So they put on lots of activities for students. So you can see in the picture there, if you just about see it, they put on a vintage clothes fair, which used to run every couple of weeks, which was really fun. They run the main two events at the start of term, which is the Freshers' Fair and the Sports Fair. So they are two large events that happen on campus, but this year were virtual, where you can meet societies, sporting activities, and start to build up friendships within the different things that you're interested in. And they put on events throughout the year. So at the moment, we've got things like Black History Month coming up. We've got a webinar series of recent graduates who are coming in as speakers, talking to students about their experience and sort of little tips and tricks of what to do when you're a student and what to do when you graduate, etc. And also one key aspect of student life that might be something you've not thought of before is accommodation. So for a lot of students, it will be the first time that they move away from home and go to university. So it will often be the first time that you've lived away from your parents and lived in accommodation that's separate to them. So a lot of students live in, which you can see in this picture, what's known as a halls of residence. However, some students do live in like private housing as well, and sort of multi-occupational housing, where there's several students all living within the same house, but they all have separate bedrooms, but they share like communal facilities. But a lot of students will live in the halls of residence, and you can see a picture of one just here. So you get like a bed, a study space, you have a communal kitchen, you get your own, normally you get your own bathroom and shower, but sometimes that is shared. But it's a really nice way because you're often with other students as well. So they're similarly, for them, it's the first time they've moved away from home. So often you make great friendships from moving into accommodation. And actually, funny enough, my best friend now, who I've now known for 5 years, was the very first person I met when I moved into my accommodation on the first day I went to university. So I'm very glad we became friends, because actually that sort of made my experience much more enjoyable in the first couple of weeks. So we sort of became buddies, if you like. So there's some of the things that the Student Union put on, but I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to press on. So here's some of the societies that the Students' Union has, and as you can see here, there's such a range of different things on offer, from subject-based to social to culture to music and performance to religion to many other sort of weird and wonderful societies. I'll put the Tea Society in the category. There's lots of different random things like cheese and wine, cake, drama appreciation, real ale. Obviously, at university you are an adult, so you can drink alcohol. So if you want to have an alcohol-based appreciation society, you can. So top tips for university then. So these are some of the things that I was thinking of this morning when I was sort of finalising the presentation as things that I thought were really good tips that I wish I had known about when I was going to university. So be open to new experience. I was sort of quite a closed person when I first went to university, but actually university opened me up to lots of new experiences. And I would say that now, after finishing, I'm a much more sort of broader person who's willing to get involved in lots of different things. So it made me a lot more open to society. Definitely make the most of your first week, although it's hard to say that when you're actually with that experience, because you don't realise just how much and different fantastic things that are going on until after it's gone. So definitely make the most of the first week, both academically and socially. So get to meet your academic advisor, get to meet your student support coordinator, and also get to meet all the different societies and things, the events that are taking place throughout that week. I'd say join one society at least. You don't have to turn up to any of their events or go along every week, but it's a good way just to have one society that if you sort of want to go along, maybe if it's week 8 in the term and you fancy doing something different, you've got that membership signed up and you can then go along. It may already be a hobby, but it could be something completely new. I mean, I wouldn't say that my hobby was drinking tea or cake, but I did sign up to the Tea or Cake Society just because it's quite a fun thing to do. And who doesn't love a cup of tea? So where can you go wrong with that? I would also practice budgeting, because this is something I probably regret a little bit, especially first year, because I didn't really know how to budget. And I did actually do not too badly when it comes to buying things like food, but I didn't really sort of budget all the different things that you need for the first couple of weeks. So what I would say is maybe with your family or with friends, maybe set up like a weekly budget and try it for the first couple of weeks, maybe over the summer before you go to university. And actually that will really help you in your first couple of weeks, because it might be the first time that you had to manage money before. It also might be the first time that you have your own bank account. And when you first have a bank account, it is quite hard actually to know how to manage that. So I would say practice budgeting beforehand, and it will do you good both in the interim period in the short term, but also in the long term as well. Definitely explore the city or town that you live in, and I would do this before you start. So something I did before going to Brookes, I actually went up to Oxford a couple of times for day trips just to explore what the city centre looked like. So I got familiar with the streets, the shops, and just the overall amenities. So when I first went there on the first day of the arrivals weekend, I wasn't completely alien to the whole area around me and didn't know where I was going. That's just a tip that I found, and I found that was quite useful. Something else I would also say is definitely learn how to cook before going to university. There will always be at least one student who gets to university in the first week and doesn't even know how to turn the oven on or to make toast. Don't worry, if you're that student, lots of other students have been in that similar position to yourself. But I would say learn how to cook at least 5 meals, basic meals, things like pasta, pizza, etc., from scratch beforehand, because often if you don't know how to cook, you might be having phone calls with parents or asking your parents, can I share a dinner with you instead, because I don't know how to do mine. Something else I would say, and this is even the case when in school, always back up your work, because I remember in second year, there was an assignment I was doing, it got to a day before the deadline, and then my computer crashed and it didn't save. I was devastated and then had to do all the work within 24 hours ahead of the deadline. So always make sure you back up your work beforehand so you have it stored in as many places, pen drives, desktops, friends' computers, families' computers, so you don't lose it, especially your final year research projects. You do not want to lose that. And it's okay to stay in touch with home. So something I did when I first started, I was quite aware that if I sort of stayed in touch with home too much, I might want to go home and not come back. So what I did is I had weekly phone calls set up with my family, maybe on Skype or Zoom, as that seems to be very popular these days. And then you can have chats with parents. But I wouldn't necessarily, if you're moving away from home, go home straight away after first arriving. So I left it about 6 weeks before going back home after first arriving at university. And I found that was a good way to sort of transition myself into university, but then start going backwards and forwards and seeing family again as well. So I'm going to talk very, very briefly about costs, but as you're only sort of in year 9, 10 and 11, this won't be too significant at the moment, but it's just useful, I suppose, to make you aware of this. And you can go and do some further research if you want to. So in terms of how students pay for university, you do have to pay for it, but in the sense you don't have to pay for it up front. And that's, if anybody has told you that, that's a myth. So most students apply for what's known as tuition fee and maintenance loans, and they cover the cost of your teaching, so that's the tuition, and then also your living costs, so accommodation, socialising, all the other things that you do in your day-to-day life. So how students pay for it all, you've got the 2 loans, as I mentioned, the tuition fee and the maintenance loan, and you also have things like bursaries and scholarships. Now, these are things you've probably never heard of in school before, and they are non-refundable payments that maybe the university or maybe sometimes the local authority pays for bursaries. So, for example, in Oxfordshire Council pay for all students if they're from an Oxfordshire state school, give them £1,000 community scholarship to go to a university locally. I don't know what the state schemes are in Wiltshire or other local authorities, but I know that's, for example, something that the local authority in Oxfordshire do. And that's still something that's ring-fenced, even if by other budgets within the government change, that is something that's ring-fenced for the time being. There's also lots of additional support. So, for example, if you're someone who has a disability, so one of my close friends, colleagues at my team at work has quite severe dyslexia. And when they were at university, they got additional funding so they could buy additional equipment like a dictaphone. So that meant when they was listening to lectures like speeches like I'm giving now, it meant they could record that speech rather than actually note any additional notes at the time, and then they could write it up later. So that really helped them in terms of their way of approaching their studies. So there's lots of support available. So in terms of tuition fees, this may change. So I wouldn't take these figures sort of too closely at the moment, but at the moment most universities charge about £9,250 per year for tuition fee entry. But as we've already discussed, most students use the tuition fee loan to pay for that, so I won't worry about that figure too much. And how students pay for it is through this sort of symbol here, Student Finance England. So they are sort of a body related to the government that gives you the loans so that it covers the cost of your tuition. And most students do not pay for their university up front. Virtually 99.9% of students will get a tuition fee loan from Student Finance England. Now, the other type of loan is the maintenance loan, and that is based on household income. But I wouldn't take too much into this at the moment. But just to maybe note that the household income, so the higher your household income, the less maintenance loan you get. So unfortunately, it's never really explicitly said by the government or by sort of UCAS or Student Finance England, but in reality, the maintenance loan doesn't necessarily cover the cost of everything. It is sort of expected, although it's never really said, that maybe some of your family or like your parents would make up the rest. However, that isn't always possible. So in my case, that wasn't possible. So I got things like part-time work opportunities in the summers before going to university and in the summers after the year had finished to sort of give me some extra income to help me while I was studying. And lots of students do that. And actually having a part-time job is really useful when you're at university, because when it comes to graduating, you've got that necessary employment experience as well as your educational background, which helps you get employment afterwards. So bursaries then, there are lots of bursaries available, and here is an example. Now, obviously, I don't expect you to learn all this table or remember this, and this won't really matter to you for another couple of years yet, but it is useful to know that if your household income is below a certain threshold, so at the moment it's 25,000, which is about the average income in the UK, so about half of households will be below this figure, you will be entitled to additional bursary support. And you can see that depending on how much below your income is, that bursary will increase to up to about £3,000. So that can be in addition to the maintenance loan that you get. You can get up to £3,000 extra from the university that you do not have to pay back. So that can be really helpful in supporting you with your studies while you're there. So how the loans work then, both loans are combined into one amount and the repayment starts after you finish the course. But I don't want to dwell on that too much because you don't really need to worry about that at this stage. But it's useful to know that you don't start repaying the loans until after you finish the course. And you don't start repaying until you earn over a certain figure. So I can say at the moment, I graduated last summer and April is coming up soon, but I don't earn that figure on screen to start repaying the loan. So at the moment, I will not be repaying any of it back. So it isn't something you need to worry about too much as affecting your finances. But I'm sure when you get into older year groups, like year 12 and 13, you'll probably receive a student finance talk anyway, which goes into this sort of topic in much more detail. You will repay it back in instalments, and it's usually about 9% of income over a certain figure. So that threshold of 25,000 changes. So by the time you get to university, that will probably be higher because the inflation would have been changed. So I don't want to dwell on student finance too much, but I do want to talk about well-being because it's really important, particularly in current situations like pandemics, to keep healthy and well. And actually at university, it can be a difficult time, particularly in the first couple of weeks when there's lots of different things going on in your mind, moving away from home, being independent, cooking, studying, making friends. There's lots of things going on. It can be a bit overwhelming. And that's okay if it does become a bit overwhelming because there's lots of support out there to help you. So there's actually at Brookes a dedicated wellbeing centre Now, no, this is not some kind of like psychiatric hospital, so you don't have to be like really mentally ill to go in there. Even if you're just feeling a bit down, you can just go in there and speak to somebody, and just they'll make you a cup of tea and just ask how your day is going. And that actually can be a really nice icebreaker in sort of lifting your spirits, and actually they can try and help you through, maybe it might even be a small problem, what you might think is a big problem, which I did. So in the first couple of weeks, I couldn't find where my lectures were, and I was getting quite frustrated that I couldn't find where I was going. I just went into the wellbeing centre and said, I'm wondering if you can help me, please. I'm just struggling to find my lectures. And the kind lady in there just came out and showed me where the room was and said, if you ever need any support or need to be taken to this room again, I'll take you in every day of the week if needs be. So they're really nice and supportive and help you through whatever may be the difficulty you're facing. There's also specific support for things like disabilities. So I mentioned the example of my friend who has dyslexia. We also have a medical centre, and most universities will have a doctor's surgery on site, so you don't need to worry about going off site for doctors and things like that. There is also some more specific facilities like counselling if you were to need it. And we also have some religious like institutions, so we actually have a chaplaincy on site, so if you want to pray and things like that, you can do so as well. So the last slide then, before I'll let you go and you can go off and do your research, just to give you a bit of a timeline, although the dates will be different when you apply, but I'll explain on the next slide how the dates work year after year. The whole UCAS process of applying to university is about 9 months to a year, so it is quite a long process, but there's different stages of what you need to do. So in the summer of your year 12, so for those of you in year 11, this will be quite soon, this will be next summer probably. Those of you in year 9 and 10, you've got a bit longer for this. Though when it's the summer of year 12, you need to register with UCAS, so that's put your details in, name, address, etc, etc. Then you need to write what's known as a personal statement, but you're going to get lots of support from the careers team, Miss Havill, Miss Smith, etc, when it comes to that time. Writing a personal statement, so that's like a supporting document to go with your application. So it's a bit like a CV or a covering letter if you're applying for a job or apprenticeship. Then September onwards, this will be when you're in year 13, you'd finalise that application, and then in the sort of October and November time, but there is normally an internal deadline in schools, which is earlier, you would send it off. However, it's useful to know that there is an official UK-wide deadline, which is normally the 15th of January. However, this year, the first time in about forever known, it was extended by 2 weeks, and it's this Friday because of the coronavirus. But hopefully, by the time you apply, coronavirus, sort of the pandemic lockdowns and these will have finished, and the normal deadline of 15th of January will be in place. And you can see by this slide here that really the dates do not change very much. So even if it's 2022, 23, 24, etc, etc, those dates, 15th of October, 15th of January, are pretty much the same. So if you want to note those dates down now, feel free to do so, but they are useful for you to know. And that is pretty much it from me. Any questions? I know I went over time slightly, I do apologise, but do you have any questions? Is there anything in the chat function?